There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel, and one of my first Alfresco Friday reads of the year. Not the first, I don't think. But anyway, it is definitely the first time I've filmed at this fabulous location this year, and it will probably be the last. This is a park that I often film in, but this particular verdant spot is I'm only able to film here when it's cloudy. And I hope that sun doesn't peek out of overcast, quite overcast, but already I'm starting to feel a bit of glare poking through, so I hope I can finish my Friday read sitting here. If not, the little gazebo thing is just steps away. And I wore my glasses here with the mask, and so they got all fogged up, and then I didn't have anything to clean them with because they didn't clear, like the fog didn't clear after 5 minutes of being off my face. So then I used my mask to clean it, and they are now so smudged I can't see out of them. So I'm gonna be doing this glassless. They've had a bit of a rain in the last hour or two, I guess, so everything's wet. I'm gonna have a wet bum, and the bush behind me, it needs to be trimmed, so I can't actually lean back against this bench because it's very wet on my back. So we're just gonna go with it. And I'm also not organized. I mean, I haven't... Gesundheit. I'm not at all organized here. I am tempted just to pull the books out of the bag and out of my memory, and whatever I talk about is what I talk about in the order I talk about it. But no, let me get my shit together before I talk about books. Personally, I am just so busy that I considered not doing this because I didn't know if I could pull myself out of all the practical busyness that I'm immersed in to do it. But this is my medicine. I absolutely need to take this day to do a Friday reads, so for my own peace of mind. So I'm busy doing taxes, and now starting the process of Kenji's legal immigration to Canada with lawyers based in Saskatoon, and the movers are coming next Sunday, so in 8 days, there's 8 or 9 days, May 1st, to load up our stuff and take it. I mean, we'll keep enough stuff that we can live for the remaining 28 days, but all of that is now at crunch time, and teaching all my classes, and just kind of carrying on and doing all the other stuff. But it's insanely busy. I think I'm packaging up boxes 101, 102, 103, 104 to mail to myself. Those will go in the mail probably today. Yeah, they will go in the mail today. Maybe 30 boxes left to send, and then the rest will go with the movers. And I have had fun picking out the books that I'm going to take in my suitcase so that I will have them upon arrival in Canada. So those will be a lot of the books that I will be reading, because I don't expect these boxes, these 140 boxes, whatever it will end up being, that I'm mailing by the cheapest slow boat rate, will arrive much before Christmas. I actually sent a friend in the UK a book as a present. I mailed it around New Year's 2022, maybe December 30th, 2021, and she still hasn't got it. And that was sent slow boat. So this is now, we're pushing May, 5 months later, and it hasn't arrived. So all it is that I sent books to, that you paid me for the shipping. Please be patient, because I don't think my library is going to start trickling in until Christmas. So I've had fun picking out the ones, and I think I'm going to make a video this weekend too. I don't know if I'll get it edited and posted much before I go, but it'll be the choices I've made, because for international travel, you get to take 2 suitcases, and I've weighed them, and they'll all fit in, and I can still take clothes and stuff. Books being much more important than clothes in terms of what I'm going to be lugging on the plane. I don't think I ever corrected something that I said several videos ago, where I found out that it was possible for the post office to pick up parcels at your house. Save my back, save having to lug these 4 boxes or 6 or 8 boxes a day that I was carrying to the post office. It's only a 10, 12, 15 minute walk to a post office from where I live, but still, it was, I'm not getting any younger, people. I get winded very easily. So it's a 10-minute walk, carrying at minimum 4 boxes, small boxes of books. I have to sit down for about 5 minutes in the middle. So I found out that the post office would pick it up, so I went and arranged it, and they made a schedule, and then they started phoning Kenji, because that was the contact number, and they apologized that was actually impossible, because I was sending these parcels by the slow boat rate, that the pickup service is only available for the higher priced shipping options. Sorry, so I've been having to lug them all. The post office here has announced that all of their shipping rates are doubling in June because of COVID and the Ukraine. So I sure chose the right time to move, because my stuff will all be in the mail before June. One last thing about shipping: I will not be sending books to any of yous, or very few of yous, from Canada, because Canada's postal rates are out of it's the cost of the book for me to send you a book from Canada. Like, it's just exorbitant, and they certainly don't have slow boat rates. Yeah, like a hardcover book, it would be $30 for me to send it to America or to Toronto or Vancouver. I might be exaggerating slightly, but I don't think so. I was just flummoxed when I saw how much the postal rates had increased since I left Canada 13 years ago. In terms of my taxes, there's 2 levels of tax in Japan: federal or national, and it's never very much. And then the city tax, or maybe if it's in a rural area, the prefectural tax, which is often, usually in my experience, quite a bit more. So last Thursday, I finally paid my 2018 tax, national tax, and I got a refund, about $350. So I was like, woohoo! But you know, it's been years since I've done any taxes, so it kind of slipped my mind that the city tax is always quite a bit more. So I wasn't able to, for various reasons that would put you to sleep to explain, didn't get my city tax for 2018 paid until yesterday, and it was exponentially more. And then they checked, and I kind of had a vague memory that I'd never paid my 2017 city tax. It had been assessed, but never paid. So, and that was double what my 2018 city tax was. So by the time I paid all that yesterday, almost half of my nest egg, half of the money that I've been saving for taxes was spent. The remaining years, 2019, 2020, 2021, my income was noticeably less, especially since 2020. So I think my city tax will be manageable, and I will have just enough money to pay everything. Leave this place, leave Japan, paid up in the taxes, because of course the Canadian tax people, they're going to want to see that I've paid my taxes, otherwise they're going to assess me. They're going to make me pay tax in Canada for the 13 years I was missing. So it's a big schmozzle, and I was much less cheerful yesterday, having had to pay a whole pile of money than I was last week, when I realized I was getting in retrospect, a very paltry refund on my national tax. All right, on to the books. I just realized I have another book to talk about. So I have finished, since my last confession, I have finished 3 books, 2 of which I've also started since I last saw you. Not including the books that I've started and finished, I have started 3. I finished a novel by an Indigenous writer who lives in British Columbia, All the Quiet Places by Brian Thomas Isaac. And I gave it a very enthusiastic 4 stars. I couldn't quite get my way to 5 stars, despite loving so much of it. It is set, I believe, in the 1950s, mid-1956, and the protagonist at the opening of the story is a 6-year-old Indigenous kid from the Okonkwo Indian Reserve. It's third-person limited point of view, and Eddie is 6 at the beginning, and it was one of the most delicious child's narrated works of fiction that I've ever read. Just because that's such a difficult thing to do, and it trips me up in 9 out of 10 books that I read, and this is the 10th one. I just loved being inside this kid's head. He was such a brat, but more than just a brat. The author captured and just worked magic with the limitations of a 6-year-old kid's view of the world, and never veered beyond it, and made it a really rich place to inhabit as a reader. And the story follows him and his family until about the age of maybe 15 or 17 or something. Much of the novel was just a series of really quiet moments in the life of this family. The father had deserted them years ago, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say he does come back. So then there's some serious stuff happens to do with violence and abuse and certainly racism from the town and the very poor relations between his mother and the bureaucratic Indian affairs agent that has never bothered to put power in 1956. The narrative doesn't flow too smoothly between the quiet moments and some much more dramatic moments. And so by the end, I was disappointed that some of the really heavy experiences that the characters endure, they weren't narrated all that well, and it was sometimes even confusing to follow what's going on here and so on. I think I would have preferred it just to be a novel of quiet moments, because that is what I'm going to take from it. And I am just so excited for this new voice in Indigenous literature on Turtle Island. I hope he's going to write more. He's not that young, but I think he published this when he was in his mid to late 60s. I will just jump at the chance to read whatever Brian Thomas Isaac puts out next, because what an immense literary gift the man has. But the execution of the way it all kind of ended and stuff, it didn't work as well. So I took a star off for that. But I really passionately recommend it to you as a exciting new voice in Indigenous literature, especially if you like fiction that really, well, if you like child-centered fiction, and if you like your fiction to really milk those quiet moments for all they're worth, because it did those things extremely well. And I had forgot that I was going to be talking about this because I finished it on April 9th, but yes, I'm glad that I told you about it. I have started and finished my first work of Irish fiction for the Irish Readathon. When the hell was that? March? And I started and finished it in April. Foster by Claire Keegan, her penultimate novella, and I loved it maybe even more, but certainly as much as I loved her most recent offering. Small things like these. Foster came out about a decade ago. She seems to put out a novella a decade. Just ripped my heart out. I am starting to appreciate more and more what can be done in short works of fiction. I mean, I've always loved short stories, but I haven't really focused on novellas, and this was just a joyous gasp of a reading experience. It's about, I think she's only about 10, 12, and she is sent to relatives, but the relationship between these relatives, it seems to be distant, and as a lot of reviews talk about them just as being foster parents, but they were distant relatives. The relationship is never all that clear, and her mother is pregnant with like a fifth or sixth child, and so the father drives a fair distance to drop her off at this childless couple's farm for them to take care of her for an unspecified amount of time. And it's the relationship that unfolds between her and these parents, and Claire Keegan just does a wonderful job of putting us right in the mind of this girl, and she's scared and she doesn't know whether to trust them, and she doesn't know whether they are good people or bad people. It takes her a long time to figure that out, and I'm not going to say much more about where that part of the story goes. The atmosphere and the tension of that, where I didn't realize until I'd put the book down for several days, after I finished it, that was the magic that was at work there. That the atmosphere was ratcheted up, and that really we were inhabiting her fears so viscerally that it felt at times like it was a scary story. And that was the fear that this kid had. So you have to read the novella to find out how much of it is just her own imaginings and how much is real. But I guess foster, I never thought about the title until right now. Come on, John, foster is for foster parents, but they were distant relatives. I never thought about the title. I always ask my guests on bite-sized book chats, well, where does the title come from? And I hadn't thought about the title for this one. It was just such a lush inhabitation of a pre-teenage Irish girl's way of moving through the world. And much like the Brian Thomas Isaac novel that I had just finished talking about, just seeing through those young eyes the world and her struggle to make sense of it. It's one of the best novellas I've ever read. Claire Keegan, I mean, I started off on the wrong foot with Claire Keegan. Doris and I did those shitty Faber, individually published Faber short story series until we got disgusted and quit 85% of the way through them because they were all terrible, except for about 3 or 4. And I didn't like the Claire Keegan story. Didn't like it at all. So maybe she's a novella writer and not a short story writer, or just, I think whoever picked those Faber shorts chose just bad stories by good writers. I'm on Team Claire now. Holy smokes, that was wonderful. Just a day or 2 ago, I finished this novel from Norway, The White Bathing Hut by Thorvald Steen, translated from the Norwegian by James Anderson. And this was not a buddy read, it's my new thing instead of buddy reads. I read this on Voxer to Lindy of Lindy's Magpie Reads and Kendra of Kendra Winchester, and they loved it with reservations. They noticed some of the things that I noticed that where I knocked a star off, 4-star read. Their reaction to the story was overall more positive. That has made me really think about my hot take reaction. So yeah, I really recommend this. And it was Lindy that found out that it is an own voices type of novel. I couldn't find that information myself, but trust a librarian, a retired librarian, to find out that it's a very autobiographical novel. The protagonist has an inherited illness that causes his muscle tissue to degenerate. It's a particular form of muscular dystrophy. And in the most present part of the story, he is alone for the weekend. Everybody that is in his world, his wife, his adult daughter, and his caretaker are away, and he's basically able to look after himself, but he falls and he's on the floor for days. And that perspective was the richest, most powerful part of the novel. It was set out on the page kind of as poetry, and it's just gorgeous writing. I found the novel to be a bit disjointed, and the quality of the writing changed because the register of the writing changed in places. I think over time that criticism will fade in my memory, and I will remember these chapters where he was on the floor and philosophizing. And just spewing poetry. He was raised with by parents who were really ashamed of disability, and Thorvald Steen does a good job of situating that within the context of what was going on in Norway and what had gone on in Norway. So there's eugenics brought into it, notions of Norwegian masculinity to do with athleticism that all work together to mire the family in secrets. So it's an inherited illness, but he's never told. He's never told that his grandfather had it and that his uncle had it. He's never meets those relatives. And he's not raised very supportively by his parents when he starts to show the signs of it. So it's him coming to terms with all that, and there's a whole series of flashbacks. There were often very short chapters where, just for example, and I don't know if this is true in this case, where here's the last page of one chapter and it continues, the action continues. Why was there a chapter break? Things like that I didn't necessarily think worked, but these are small criticisms compared to what a powerful novel this was. Overall, the longest chapters are chronicling a visit just a few days before he fell, alone in his place, with his elderly mother, and trying to get her to open up and share the secrets, and how that all turned out. I also didn't really like the way that his mother was represented. She was very secretive. She was, also brittle, emotionally brittle at the age she was, and of a lifetime of harboring these secrets. But I just didn't find her a very interesting character. And I didn't really enjoy spending so much time with her when she was so unresponsive. So what I have to sort out for myself is Was that just a really good portrayal of a character that I disliked? Or was it a less than satisfying characterization? Those kind of people in real life bore me and don't interest me. Or maybe I will ultimately conclude that he just didn't render her character very well. Anyway, a little bit of a mixed bag for me. Much less of a mixed bag for my narratees. No, my narratees, Kendra and Lindy. So I don't know whether either of them will be talking about this on their channel, but probably Lindy will for sure, and I do recommend it. So those are what I've finished. I have started 3 others that I have not finished and won't finish anytime soon. As I told you last time, I started A Concise History of Wales by Geraint Jenkins. And I've read 10%. It's really interesting. It's well written as an academic history, and I just haven't had much time to devote to it. I have read the 10%, and it's at the prehistoric age of Wales, but already intriguing in the way that, to varying degrees of historical accuracy, that prehistory was mythologized and turned into a nation-building kind of propaganda in maybe the early 19th century. That's interesting to me. So I'm going to keep reading it. Don't have much else to say at this early stage. I have started the Queen Alexandra biography. Queen Alexandra, Loyalty and Love by Francis Dimond. It's a chunky bugger. The footnotes are at the end of each chapter, so the text stops at about page 650. I'm really enjoying it. I am 35 pages in, and it is densely written, but so far my impression, I would say I'm enjoying the scholarship. She was given permission by the Queen to go into archives that had never been accessed by any other biographer. And so I've been looking for kind of a bias of pro-monarchist or kind of sugarcoating stuff, and so far there hasn't been any of that. Like, she's really getting into the family dynamics between Queen Victoria and her heir, Bertie, who became Edward VII and who married Alexandra, and a lot of fascinating stuff about Alexandra was Danish royalty, and her parents were fascinating, and I'd read a little bit about them in other stuff, but nothing that had particularly stuck in my mind. And this is creating a really psychodynamic portrait, and in terms of the way that the royals gossiped about each other, and there were rumors that Princess Alexandra was a slut. She was only 16 when she first met Bertie, but that she had already misbehaved with a soldier, and that there was something really terrible about the mother, and the British royal family were doing a lot of fact-checking, especially through Victoria's namesake daughter, Victoria, who at this time was a German princess, and they became emperor and empress much later. But it's really gossipy, and they eventually concluded that there was a whole bunch of political and other reasons why these rumors had been created, and that they ultimately were false, and that Alexandra was a very nice young woman and would be perfect for Bertie, and maybe keep him in line because he was a slut already. I'm enjoying it a lot, actually, the more I talk about it. It's a book that I will probably not read very much of in the next month, but I sure enjoy it when I pick it up. And finally, in terms of what's my reading report, I am just delighted to tell you that I have fallen deep into Young Mungo by Douglas Stuart. I don't need to say very much about it. Everybody's reading it or has read it, and you're hearing all kinds of reactions, mostly positive, I think. And so far on page 36, put me in the Young Mungo love camp. I'm just finding it mesmerizingly. I don't think I can use joyous or joyful anymore in this video, can I? I am just finding it mesmerizingly satisfying. I'm doing it as an audio text combo. I can't remember the name of the audio narrator. I could get the audiobook significantly cheaper on Apple Books than I could anywhere else. So check that out. I think I got it for about $15, $17. So I'm doing it with the wonderful Scottish narrator, a different narrator than had done Shuggy Bane, but just as good. And I am... Oh, can you see him? You have to see him. He's gone. Okay. And so I'm listening, audio text combo. I'm reading while listening, and I don't have much time. I certainly haven't had much time this week to get very far in it, but I just love it. Douglas Stuart. This is going to be a very similar experience, I can tell, to Shuggy Bane. Like, I get immersed so deeply in what's being narrated that, I mean, I can still close my eyes and step back into any chapter of Shuggy Bane, and I could tell you the whole book myself. There'd be names I'd forget and stuff, but the emotional detail that is rendered in such crisp, sensuous, heartbreaking detail, I just carry that whole novel around inside me. And young Mungo so far is starting out exactly the same. I think he's about 15, and his drunken mother's AA friends, who he doesn't know very well, take him on a fishing trip to get him out of Glasgow. And they're strange, and there's some sexual tension between the younger of the two men and 15-year-old Mungo. I don't know where that's going or going anywhere, but in flashbacks to that he has suffered some violence that his older brother was somehow responsible for. Not that he was the attacker, but I think his brother's mixed up in some gangs and stuff, and poor young Mungo got victimized. And so the drunken mother, who reminds me a lot of the drunken mother in Shuggy Bane, but is still yet a very distinct character, thinks that just send him out of town for the weekend with her AA friends. Nobody is sober, but they're her AA friends. And even the description of the loch, the lake where they go fishing, is so gorgeous. I've been putting up quotes on Instagram and Litzy and Twitter based on the reviews, and I've stopped watching reviews. I know that Greg struggled with the ending a bit, I think, if my memory of, and I don't think I watched his full review, just enough to know that it wasn't as successful for him as Shuggy Bane. I'm aware that Bob the Booker absolutely loved it, and I haven't watched his review. And I'm just ignoring reviews until I finish, but I have a feeling that this could be one of my books of the year as well, just based on 36 pages. I am in love with what I've read so far. That's my book report. Before I talk about what I'm going to read next, because it will be a segue into that, let me talk about BookTube Spin, which I'm participating for the first time. My BookTube Spin video was one of the more recent videos that went up. This is a fabulous BookTube tradition brought to BookTube a couple of years ago by Rick McDonald, and this is my first time participating, and I got two really interesting books. I think you know what BookTube Spin is, right? You make a list of 20, and then he spins the wheel twice, and whatever two numbers his wheel lands on are the two books out of your list that you have to read in the next 2 or 3 months. So it's really fun. And one of the books that I got, I'll tell you the book I'm not going to be starting right away, and that was the Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. I probably won't start that till I get on the plane, but I'm really looking forward to reading my first anything by Elizabeth von Arnim. But the one I'm going to start in the coming days is a queer black short story collection, Kiss the Scars on the Back of My Neck by Jo Okonkwo. And I'm going to be reading this to Lindy. And I haven't heard too much about it, but I'm looking forward to seeing how that all goes. So I'll be starting that this week. Kendra had asked before I'd finished The White Bathing Hut if I would read Hilary Mantel's memoir, Giving Up the Ghost, to her, because it's not available on audio, and I was all too happy to agree. So I will be reading separate books to Lindy and Kendra for the next go-around, and I'll be starting Giving Up the Ghost in the coming days as well. And because this is a special circumstance where I'm reading two of them in Voxer, I'm going to allow myself to go over my 15-book limit by one to encompass that project. Kiss the Scars on the Back of My Neck will bring me up to 15, and the Mantel will bring me up to 16, and that's fine. I'm going to be finishing stuff up also before you see me next, so it'll all balance out. It's time to wrap this up, folks. I don't know when you'll see me next, but I hope that most of the really busy stuff will be finished by the next time you see me. There might only be 1 or 2 more Friday or Saturday reads from Japan, so thanks for watching.